Alright, hello Poli Sci 1, welcome to Chapter 2. Um, this is a longer chapter than Chapter 1, so I might be skipping some slides just because I would like to keep this to 20 minutes. Alright, function of the Constitution. This is one of your essay questions for the first test, so you'll probably want to know what these functions are. There are three main functions of the Constitution. One is it grants powers, it gives powers to the national government. So the president can veto laws. That is a grant of power. Congress has control of money. That is a grant of power. So these are also known as enumerated powers, and there are only 17 powers given to the national government by the Constitution. So you want to remember enumerated powers, especially with subsequent chapters. We're going to be talking about enumerated powers a lot. The power to declare war, control of money, veto power. All of these are grants of powers. So a Constitution will give powers to the national government. So I have here the power to declare war, the veto power. Second function of the Constitution is it limits power. Limits power of the government. So government cannot take away certain rights, right? So we're talking about the Bill of Rights here. The government cannot limit your free speech rights. They cannot limit your free association rights. They cannot pick your religion for you. So government can limit the rights, or a Constitution limits the rights of the government. Government cannot search your property without a warrant. Last function is it outlines the structure of government. It sets up the government. So easily we should know three branches of government, right? So the Constitution sets forth the government structure and what power each branch will have. Three branches, right? Executive, legislative, and judicial. Excuse me. Article 1 establishes the legislative branch. Article 2 of the Constitution establishes the executive branch. And Article 3 establishes the judicial branch. You hear about these being co-equal branches, that they share power. They do share power, but one is more important than the other. One is more powerful than the other. Everybody thinks the president is the most powerful of the three, but it is not. Congress is the most powerful of the three. Congress makes laws, so they make the laws. They decide what laws are going to be. The executive enforces those laws. You cannot enforce laws that aren't there. So Congress is the most powerful of the three because they set the laws. The executive will enforce those laws, and the judicial will interpret those laws, are they constitutional or not. Excuse me. So, yes, they are co-equal branches. They do share power, but one is still more important than the other. Let's see. Rule of law. Principle of law is more powerful than any one person. We would hope that is the rule of law in the United States. We do not want individuals to rule because they can trample rights. The law is impartial. The law doesn't look at any gender, doesn't look at any color. It is impartial. Whereas we, human beings, are biased in our thinking. This preserves that procedures set forth in the Constitution will be adhered to. The law is written. It is there. It is impartial. Constitutional democracy. Are we a democracy or a republic? Most of the time you hear it's a democracy. Not necessarily. In a pure democracy, we vote on everything. We do not vote on everything. In a republic, representative votes. So the U.S. is a republic. It is not a democracy. It's not a true democracy. It is a form of democracy, but it is a republic. We send representatives to go speak for us. We don't vote on everything that comes forward. The idea is it limits majority rule. You do not want the majority always to win. Majority should not always win. It gives power to the minority. Framers fear majority rules and excess democracy. Too much democracy is a bad thing, according to the founders. We do not want mob rule. Mob rule is bad. They can trample the rights of the individual or minority, and you do not want the minority's rights to be trampled. So, this is why the founders went with a republic and not a true democracy. If it was a true democracy, we'd vote on everything, and the majority would always win. Whereas in a republic, there are institutions that control the majority, and we'll go through those as we go throughout the semester. So if we look at how the framers set up this, how they set up this republic. Originally, in the Constitution, the House was elected by the people. The people will vote in the House. So we pick who represents the district, the congressional district here. So that's House of Representatives. In the Senate was supposed to be voted in by state legislatures. State legislatures got together and they voted 2 senators to go represent the state in the Senate. President was to be voted in by electoral college, not by the people, but the electoral college. And then justices of the Supreme Court were to be appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. So the only one that's voted in by the people is the House of Representatives. Everything else is voted in by some other entity. The reason is because the founders feared this idea of majority rules and excess democracy. The House could pass whatever the people want, but the Senate will check the House's power and say, you cannot pass that, we don't have the money to do that. So it cools the House's effect on passing whatever laws they want, because the House will do what the people want. So the Senate, because they're not beholden to the people, will do what the state legislatures want and not have things overspent. And we'll go over the Electoral College when we get to Chapter 4. Okay? So this idea of the Republic, we don't want too much democracy. Too much democracy is a bad thing. If you go to my poli-sci 5 class, we talk about how Socrates and Plato look at democracy, and it's one of the worst forms of government because it descends into mob rule. And the rights of the minorities minority will be trampled. I'm going to skip the founding era. We all know we're a former English colony. Most of our ideals and laws come from England. All right, Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence comes from the Two Treaties of Government by John Locke. So, when we talked about in Chapter 1, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, or property, those ideas come from Locke. The Declaration is a document telling England why we are leaving. So it's kind of like a breakup text message. We're sending a letter to England saying, we don't like you anymore, let's just be friends, and we're leaving. So that's what the Declaration is. It's when asked, is the Declaration law? The Declaration of Independence is not law. It is rhetoric. It's telling England why we're breaking up with them, why we're leaving. So it's not necessarily law, but ideas of law come through. We talk about natural rights. So important concepts. Natural rights, the idea that individuals hold certain rights because they are human. Governments cannot take away these inalienable or can't be transferred rights. What we talked about in Chapter 1, those three rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Locke is life, liberty, and property. Pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is more encompassing than property, so I think that's why Jefferson went with pursuit of happiness. Government's creation and servant of the people. It is there to serve you, not tell you what you have to do or can't do. Government is there to protect the rights of the people. So it's there to protect our rights. That is its main function, according to the founders. It is to protect rights, not take rights away. When the government is not protecting rights, it's being destructive. It is the people's duty to revolt against that government, which is what the founders were doing when they told England that you are trampling our rights, we are leaving. All right, so the first government of the United States, once we win our independence, is not the current Constitution we had. The first government is known as a confederation. A confederation means strong state governments. The state governments were more powerful than the national government and decided what the laws were going to be, or the laws that were going to be adhered to. So we have the Articles of Confederation. Adopted during the Revolutionary War, they created a weak national government. States retained sovereignty, freedom, and independence. We thought of ourselves more as Californians before we thought of ourselves as Americans. That's the thinking under a confederation. Our state is more important than our unity with other states. Prohibited Congress from interfering with states' commerce policies. All right, we're going to get into problems with the Articles of Confederation because we don't have it today. Why did we get rid of it? And you see this word confederation in American history. The South during the Civil War was a confederation. They were fighting for the idea of the Articles of Confederation. They wanted strong state governments. Prohibited Congress from taxation. If Congress can't tax, they can't pay for a military, they can't do their job of protecting people. So taxation was important. Congress cannot tax. So we have other problems. Revenues would be supplied by states. I don't know about you, but if you don't have to pay back your parents, are you going to pay back your parents if you're borrowing money from them? No. It's kind of the same thing with states. Are states really going to pay? No. The Articles provide for no separate executive and no national courts. So there is no executive to enforce the laws, and there's no courts to interpret those laws passed by the national government. So if there's no executive, no courts, how does it function? The Congress cannot go out and make people follow the law or interpret those laws. So you have a problem. Changes in terms of the articles need approval not only of Congress but of the legislatures of every state. You had to get all states to agree to change anything in the Articles of Confederation. I don't know about you, but my wife and I can't decide on where to go to dinner half the time. So can you get 13 states when we originally started to agree on things? Economic depression brought about by loss of British markets. Who did we beat during the Revolutionary War? The British. They're going to be salty. They're not going to be happy with us. Are they going to interdict our shipping? Are they going to allow us to trade with other countries? No, they are still the most powerful country in the world at the time, and they're not going to let us trade with other countries easily. The ravages of war. What does war do to an economy? Especially the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War is fought on American soil. So, the ravages of war will pretty much destroy your infrastructure. You have to rebuild. You have to pay money. It's going to cost you a lot. So war is bad when it's fought in your country. State legislatures suspended debts. States decided they were not going to pay back money that was borrowed. What happens to the banks that let them borrow that money? They go bankrupt. Or they got to go to the people and collect on their debt so that they're able to survive. Bad thing when states suspended their debts. States are printing their own currencies. What is the value of currencies between different states? Some states had different valuations. So you had all of this different money flowing around the country, and really, what was it worth? There was nothing there to say what it was worth. So what happens is, leads to Shays' rebellion. Weakened Congress leads to the nation dissolving. There is no strong national government. It is not doing its job of protecting rights. So farmers, led by Daniel Shays, marched to prevent foreclosures on their land and cattle. So when states suspended their debts, where did the banks go? They went to farmers like Daniel Shays and said, you need to pay back this loan that we gave you. And they felt it was unfair. And like it said earlier in the Declaration of Independence, when your rights are being trampled by the government, it is your duty to revolt against that government. So that's what they do. Fortunately or unfortunately, the rebellion didn't work. It was put down, but it pushed the founders to set up a new form of government. And hopefully it change the Articles of Confederation. All right, here's your second essay question from this chapter. You're going to tell me what the disagreements were during the Constitutional Convention. You're going to tell me what the two plans that were proposed and what was the compromise between them. So, when we talk about disagreements, there are 5 main disagreements when we look at those disagreements. 1, power. Who should have more power? The national government, state governments. Well, we just had an Articles of Confederation. Those Articles of Confederation gave states more power, but now some people want to give the national government more power. 2, what's the legislative branch going to look like? How's it going to be populated? 3, what's the executive branch going to look like? How is it going to be populated? 4, judicial branch. What does the judicial branch look like? How is it going to be populated? And the 5th issue is slavery. Okay, so these are the disagreements. So when you talk about the plans, you're going to need to talk about these 5 things in those 2 plans and these 5 things in the compromise. So first plan, Virginia plan. Large state, large population, they're going to want it a certain way. So their plan proposed a stronger national government and a Congress based on numerical representation. Boom. So the Virginia plan wants a stronger national government, and answering what the legislators are going to look like, it's going to be based on numerical representation. That means the bigger the state population, the more representatives you're going to have. Of course, Virginia has the largest population, so they will have the most representatives. Is that fair for states that have small populations? No. Are small states going to go with that? Probably not. So they call for a 2-house legislature. Properly elected lower house elects the upper house. Again, this looks at the legislature and what it's going to look like. So 2-house legislature, lower house is elected by the people, then that lower house elects the upper house. Broad but undefined legislative power with absolute veto over laws passed by state legislatures and taxing power. That is a lot of power for states to give up, where the national government can veto laws passed by state legislatures. And then there's also giving some taxing power to the national government so that they can pay to protect rights. Single executive elected by the legislature for a fixed term. So 1 president, 1 king, elected by the legislature. The legislature will look at who the executive will be and vote them in. So that's what the executive will look like. National judiciary, elected by the legislature. So a national judiciary that oversees national laws, elected by the legislature. If you look at this plan, all the powers held by the legislature. They get to pick who the executive is, they get to pick who the judiciary is. So a lot of power is vested into the legislative branch. They did call for a council of revision composed of executive and judiciary to review laws passed by the national government. So it's just to review laws. They don't have veto power. And really, if they were to go against the legislature, they could probably impeach these two, put in people that agree with them, and then hold more power. I don't have up here number 5, slavery. Virginia wants to keep slavery, so they want to keeps the institution of slavery, and they want slaves to be counted as a full person. The more population that you have, the more representatives you're going to have, so it's going to make it bigger. So Virginia wants slaves to be counted, but also be counted for representation purposes. All right, second plan, New Jersey plan. Pretty much the opposite of everything that Virginia wanted. Plan called for a modest change. They wanted to keep the Articles of Confederation, strong state governments, a one-house legislature with equal state representation, one state, one vote. So Virginia would have one vote, New Jersey would have one vote, New York would have one vote, one state, one vote. Is that fair for Virginia that has a large population as compared to the others? Yes, it is unfair. Same legislative powers under the Articles, power to levy some taxes and regulate commerce. So they would regulate trade between states. I think this is where both the Virginia plan and New Jersey plan agreed. And then they were allowed to have some taxes. And then a plural executive, removed by legislature on petition for majority of state governors. Plural executive, we would have 5 presidents, per se. Can you imagine voting for 5 people running for president today? How crazy would that be? And then judiciary appointed by the executive to hear appeals on violations of national laws in state courts. So they do also look at the judiciary. It's not picked by the legislature. They are picked by the executive. So you can see remnants of this plan in the compromise as well. And a supremacy clause, similar to that found in Article 6 of the present Constitution. We will go over Article 6 in a little bit, pretty quickly, so that you know what Article 6 covers. All right, great compromise. So in this, New Jersey with slavery, the 5th issue. New Jersey wants to ban slavery, outlaw it, and slaves should not be counted as any person. Should be counted 0 because then that's a bigger population. I know a lot of people think that it should be reversed, but really that's the way it is. Virginia wants slaves to be counted to have bigger population. New Jersey, if you're going to keep slavery, you shouldn't have. They shouldn't be counted. So we have a 2-chamber Congress in the Great Compromise. So now we're looking at, answering number 1, we should be more powerful. They come up with an ingenious solution. They go with federalism. Federalism. Power is shared between the national government and state governments. I don't have that in the notes, so you probably want to know what federalism means. So answering number 1, we create a federal government, power shared between the national government and state governments. We have a 2-chamber Congress, this is the compromise. We have the House of Representatives, was to be voted in by the people and based on population from the states. So this makes Virginia happy. The bigger the population, the more representatives you're going to have. California has the most today, 53 representatives. The smallest is like Wyoming with 1. The Senate was to be elected by state legislatures and was represented equally from each state. So again, you would need to remember that the Senate is voted by state legislatures, not by the people. Today they're voted by the people, but before it's state legislatures. Again, to limit excess democracy or mob rule. And 2 per state. Executive is elected by the Electoral College, so you have a single executive elected by the Electoral College. And justice of the court system will be selected by the executive and approved by the Senate. So again, sharing that power between the 2. And the issue of slavery, I think I have that on the next slide. North-South Compromise, Congress agreed not to outlaw slavery. The South would not agree to join the United States if slavery was outlawed. So agreed not to outlaw slavery. The Congress agreed not to tax exports, only imports. What this does is allows Congress to stop the importation of slaves into this country. Whatever slaves are here are still slaves, but we will tax to the hilt anybody importing more slaves. And the 3/5 Compromise. Slaves being counted as 3/5 of a person in order for representation. So that's the middle ground. Both sides got 3/5 Compromise. All right, I'm going to skip separation of powers. We're going to go over that when we go over chapter 3, 4, and 5. So we're not going to, because I'm running out of time. Bill of Rights, we will go over the Bill of Rights when we get to civil liberty, civil rights in chapter 18. So we'll skip this one as well. You should know the Constitution is divided into 3 parts. Pretty simple. Part 1 is the preamble, before, preamble, so that's first. The articles are second, so articles 1, 2, and 3, where we talk about the legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch. And then part 3, the amendments. When you amend something, you're adding to it or changing it, so that's part 3. That's the last part of the Constitution. The articles you should remember. There are 7 articles for the test. I would say you need to know Articles 1, 2, 3, and 6. Definitely know Article 1 sets up the legislative branch, Article 2 sets up the executive, and Article 3 is judiciary. If I haven't mentioned it, Articles 1, 2, and 3 will be on the test, so please know those for the test, because Articles 3, 2, and 1 will be on the test, just so you know, okay? So again, remember, legislative is the most important of the 3 because it makes the laws. Executive is the second most important because you have to have the law enforced upon you before it can be judged on you. You have to be pulled over first before you have to get the ticket first before you go to court, right? So that's why the executive is Article 2. Article 3 is judiciary. Article 6, supremacy of the Constitution. No law can be higher than the Constitution. So when you think of Article 6, think of Nacho Suprema Taco Bell. No nachos can be higher than Nacho Suprema Taco Bell. So no law can be higher than the Constitution of the United States. So Article 6 is important. These other articles are important. Federal and state power with Article 4. Yeah, amending the Constitution is important. I will let you look that up. Know how the Constitution is amended. There's 2 ways that it's amended. And then ratification of Constitution. Constitution is already ratified. We know that. And that is it for Chapter 2. Sorry I went really fast. If I did go too fast for you, please let me know. Come to my office hours. I will help you. And we'll see you for Chapter 3. Have a good day.